California implemented a $20 minimum wage for fast food workers. Do you feel like that's too low?
Too low?
It's hard to live in California now. I mean,
Well,
real estate
housing is expensive.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the best minimum wage is zero. We shouldn't have a minimum wage. And, we didn't always have minimum wages. The origins of the minimum wage, they basically were discriminatory. You had people who wanted to force employers not to hire the Chinese, not to hire African Americans because they were working for lower wages than white people were working for. And one of the reasons was there was some, racism to a degree at that time. But one way that you overcame racism was to work for less. So if I was Chinese and I went to work for somebody who didn't really like the Chinese, one way I can convince you to hire me was, well, I'll work for less money, right? Most people would prefer steak over hamburger. So given the choice, you're going to buy a steak. So why does anybody buy hamburger when they like steak better? Hamburger's cheaper. If hamburger and steak were the exact same price, nobody would buy hamburger. So how does hamburger compete with steak? It's cheaper. So the Chinese or African Americans back then, in order to overcome the fact that there was some prejudice, they were like, look, we'll work for less. And now the guy that's prejudiced is like, well, yeah, I really don't like the Chinese, but I mean, I'm not going to pass up this money that I could get by hiring them. And so, and obviously over time, as you hire more Chinese or more African Americans, your prejudices might go away as you spend more time with them and you see that they're good workers, and then as they become more valuable to you because they've worked with you, they know your business, you start giving them raises. Otherwise, they'll quit and they'll work someplace else. But so what happened was white people got governments to impose minimum wages to stop the hiring of the Chinese, to stop the hiring of African Americans, because now it costs nothing to discriminate, right? If I have to pay the same price for hamburger as steak, I'm eating steak. If I have to pay the exact same wages to hire a Chinese guy than a white guy, I'll take the white guy. Now, some people might think, well, that's not fair. Well, okay, well, it's better than the guy, the Chinese guy being unemployed. Right, let them get a job. But that's where the origin of the minimum wage. It was to stop people from hiring. And that's really what it does today. I mean, it's not really about racism. At this point, most people don't care if the worker is Chinese or white. I mean, those prejudices by and large don't exist anymore. I'm not saying that there's zero prejudice today, but there's a lot less than there was 100, 200 years ago. The minimum wage law just makes it very hard for low-skilled or marginally skilled people to find employment. It's not really something that burdens the employer so much as the employee. So when you have a minimum wage, let's say California says the minimum wage is $20 an hour. What California is saying is that if you are a person and you want to get a job, you need to convince somebody to pay you $20 an hour or you can't work. Now, how am I going to convince somebody to pay me $20 an hour? Well, I have to convince them that by hiring me and paying me $20 an hour, I will deliver enough productivity to your company so that you will make more than $20 an hour. You'll pay me $20 an hour, and by employing my labor, you might have $25 an hour in revenue, and you're going to make $5 off me. But what if I don't have a lot of skill? Right? What if I don't, I haven't really had any jobs in the past. I'm not that well educated. Maybe I can only, through my own hard work, my muscle, right? What I'm willing to do, maybe I can make you $15 an hour. Maybe I could do that. Well, you're not going to hire me and pay me $20 and lose $5 an hour. So I'm not going to get a job. Even though I would like to have a job at $10 an hour, $12 an hour, it's better than no job at all, but the government made it illegal. Because that's the real minimum wage. It's zero. That's how much money you earn. If you can't get a job at the legal minimum wage, you get zero.
Don't you think that's going to speed up AI or robots taking over some of these jobs?
If I'm an employer and the government is artificially driving up the cost of wages, I'm going to look for ways to substitute machines for humans. So to the extent that I can automate, right, and that drive to automation is going to be accelerated the higher the wage cost is. Because when I have to do a cost-benefit analysis of how much, right, is it worth the investment? Because I'm going to have to spend money up front to automate a business. So what is my payback? It's the labor cost that I save. So the higher the wages that I avoid by automating, the quicker the payback on my investment. So let's say wages are $10 an hour. It may not make sense for me to automate because the $10 an hour I save may not justify the upfront cost. But if you jack up my wage cost at $20 an hour, and now I run the numbers, it might be that automation is the best thing that I can do. And so then I make the investment and fire all my workers. So yes, I mean, human beings are competing with machines, right? And the AI is making the machines a lot smarter. And so they're a lot more competitive. And a lot of jobs are going to get eliminated that might not have been eliminated. And, the public, by and large, prefers human interaction. Now, that might change as the AI gets better, but I always hate it. One of the first things I usually do when they answer the phone is, agent, let me speak with a representative. I mean, there's a lot of things that I can't do with our automated programs. A lot of people don't like pumping their own gas. They'd rather have somebody else pump it. But, they end up saving money, and so they pump it themselves. And so, but all else being equal, if there was no minimum wage, there'd be a lot more full-service gas stations. But because they require such a high cost for the workers relative to the value they add, people are like, screw it, I'll pump my own gas. And so there's going to be a lot of people would prefer human waiters and waitresses, but they're not going to get them because the government made them too expensive. So you're stuck with self-serve and automation.
I almost like the automation. We went to a sushi restaurant a few days ago in New York, and the entire thing was automated. You get there and you press a few little buttons on a screen, and the sushi comes out on a conveyor belt. And then you press, close tab. It's something nice about just
there's something, having a nice, entertaining, attractive waitress, at your table. I mean, as opposed to just pushing buttons and serving yourself, right? I mean, but if there's a big enough cost savings, I think most people would do it. You don't have to tip the AI like you tip the waitress, and now it's you're paying 20% of your bill extra for that human waiter waitress.
Yeah.
So like a lot of this stuff, but I think, as they end up with AI and automation, and as the cost to produce a robot, a humanoid looking robot, like an android, that has a personality and laughs and smiles and is intelligent and interacts with you and has a conversation with you, then probably people will be fine with that as opposed to an actual human being. But all this stuff is all going to happen over time, and this is all progress that is attributable to what's left of capitalism. I mean, people think, oh, this is a bad thing because the robots are going to take our jobs. No, they're freeing us up from having to do these jobs, just like every labor-saving device. I mean, the shovel, took a lot of jobs of diggers, but we're all glad that we don't have to dig with our hands. You know how much it would cost to build this house if people had to dig with hands? if they didn't have any tools, how long it would take? How many slaves would I need to build this house? Because that's how they built the houses in the in the Egyptians and the Romans. They had all these slaves. They didn't have machines, but machines made it so that one machine does the work of 100 people, right? And we're not upset that 100 jobs have been destroyed. 100 people have been liberated to do something else. And now more people can afford to have homes because we don't need to monopolize so many workers to build them.
I think it's one of the arguments that the market could keep going up exponentially for the next few decades is because AI and robotics are going to increase productivity to such high amounts that right now we can't even fathom what we're able to accomplish because we haven't thought of it yet.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's, my son is in that camp and he's like, very immersed in AI. He used to be a crypto guy. Now he really doesn't care about crypto because it's just AI. But yeah, I mean, that is something that I'm willing to concede is an outlier get out of jail free card potentially for some of these fiscal problems that I think are about to blow up if we can get enough growth in the economy rapidly to bring down the debt to GDP levels to a manageable level by growing our way out of the problem. I just don't think that it's going to roll out that quickly. I mean, things always take time. I mean, look how long it's taking. We still don't have autonomous cars even out of Tesla. right? From when they had the first Tesla. You know, my father told me that he went to the 1939 World's Fair, and one of the things they had was a helicopter in every driveway. So people were going to be using helicopters instead of cars, you know, but, you know, we're still on the ground. We don't have flying cars. Back to the Future had flying cars in 2015, right? That's almost 10 years in the past now. That's how crazy that is. I remember going to the movies in 1985, watching Back to the Future in the theater, thinking how far into the future 2015 was. And that, yeah, we could have flying cars by then, right? But we don't have flying cars, right? But we have drones. Things take longer than you think to really make the type of change that would be needed. But I can see in certain industries, AI having a pretty rapid effect. The question is, though, in a free market economy, when workers are displaced by automation or computers, they can, you know, do something. They can do other things. They can transition to other things. But today, they may not have that ability with a lot of the laws and regulations. And the government may create incentives for people who are displaced by innovation. Instead of finding something else productive to do, they just may live off the government. And so the government may just end up printing more money and having bigger deficits because, oh, it's not fair. You lost your job to AI. It's not your fault. So now we just give you universal basic income or something like that. And so we don't get all the benefits of the new productivity because the worker who's freed up doesn't find something else to do. He just lives off the government, which means he lives off the taxpayer, which is robbing us of the benefits of the productivity. Now, I suppose at some point in the future, to the extent that everything that we need can be created, you know, at almost no cost by AI, well, then none of it's going to matter, right? If everybody can have everything they want and nobody has to work, well, then we don't have these problems anymore, right? Because everything is about, and economics, you know, is about how do you satisfy unlimited human desires with limited resources. Well, if AI means we have unlimited resources, well, then there's nothing to worry about, right? Everybody can have whatever they want and nobody has to work and nobody has to depend on government because it's all there. And maybe that's the way society will be eventually, you know, if we can create it for ourselves. But I don't know how far off that is.